A record NWSL crowd in California. Americans had a rough ride in Italy, and we check in with the Colorado soccer scene. That and more on Monday's Morning Kickaround. Hello and welcome to the show. You found your way to Morning Kickaround, where we cover the world's favorite game from the world's most favoritist country, coming to you live each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. I'm Robert Kerr. On the other side of the screen is Jason Davis. Thank you for joining us. How you doing, Mr. JD?
I'm good. I'm ready to go on a Monday. We start a new week. Lots of interesting things to talk about in the world of soccer, our favorite game, here while we sit in our favorite country, Rob.
Yes, indeedly do. We did hit 3.25 thousand subscribers over the weekend. Thank you for joining us in this adventure we call Morning Kickaround. Hit subscribe if you'd like to hop on board. You can become a member, help join the Morning Kickaround community, become an MK Ultra. If you don't want to do all that, you could hit the thanks button underneath. Anything you donate through a super thanks will help out the show. You can also help us out on coffee.com/morning kickaround, or just sit there and enjoy and then tell your friends about all the fun things you heard on Morning Kickaround. You ready to rock? You ready to kick these longest of balls here on Monday morning, sir?
Sure. Let's see what we got. Let's go.
All right, here we go. Monday mornings, long balls here on Morning Kickaround. Morning, this are the long balls here on Monday morning, August 25th. I'm Robert. He's Jason. These are our kind of like our headlines for the program. We got good, bad, and fun. Starting off with the good on long ball number one. A record crowd came to visit an NWSL game. Over 40,000 fans in the Oracle Park you see on your screen. They're filling up the San Francisco Giants baseball stadium, smashing the previously held 35,000 attendance just last year in Chicago. So Bay FC didn't get the win, but they entertained the crowd. A 2-3 loss against the Washington Spirit right there in beautiful surroundings.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful surroundings. You have to play in a building like this to be able to break a record, so I'm going to give them a pass. And as soccer fields in baseball stadiums go, this is far from the worst I've ever seen, right? There's obviously that dead space in the outfield, right center and right field are kind of dead space with no fans along the field. But this is pretty close. I mean, I don't know how, I don't know why it doesn't look like this in some other places. It's pretty bad in other places. I do know.
Well, baseball stadiums are so randomly sized and shaped that
right.
Not all look the same.
They're not uniform. Absolutely. That is part of it. I am on the record as hating soccer and baseball stadiums. It is one of my least favorite things about American soccer. And yet, again, this one kind of gets a pass. Lots of reasons why baseball stadiums don't work. It's the configuration of the field, obviously. It's also the fact that the stands tend to be very flat, at least at the field level for baseball games. So you don't get that wall. You don't get the sound really hitting the field. It kind of feels like a dead space. But this game was fun. There were some wacky things happening in this game. And that first goal from Washington was, I think, wind aided or something. And before the game, I think on Saturday, I had seen a post on Blue Sky from a weather expert, a San Francisco weather expert, or a baseball fan, somebody who knew something about the winds there at Oracle Park, obviously coming off the bay. And this person was saying, like, the goalkeeper on the first base side will experience this, and the goalkeeper on the left field side will. And I was like, these are cursed words. These are cursed words no one should ever have to say. And it did affect the game. But again, 40,000 is kind of hard to complain about when we're talking about growing the sport. And I do think the other thing here that's very interesting, Rob, is what this means for Bay FC's ability to be a team that represents the entire Bay Area and not just the South Bay, which is where they normally play their games, right? Again, this is a one-off. This is not, they're not going to be playing in Oracle Park all the time. So what do we see? I do have, by the way, let me get rid of the banner so you can see this. I do have the record attendance numbers for, this says most attended NWSL games, and I grabbed this, I think, from Sports Business Journal. But that third one is not an NWSL game because the NWSL did not exist in 2001. But there you go. You get an idea. And again, it's baseball stadium, demolished football stadium that is also a soccer stadium, to be fair to the Seattle Reign. Snapdragon, which is home to lots of stuff, gets, 5 of them there? And that's the max they can do. They can't go more than 32-2 at Snapdragon. So I don't know. It has some things about it that make me not love it, Rob. But then again, we are not in a position where we can be like, oh, this is bad. It's good when 40,000 people support soccer. We'll see if Bay FC can turn this into something in San Francisco beyond where they normally play their games.
Yeah, I guess they've been averaging 13,000 for their games in their regular home venue. So a huge jump there. But like with many emerging leagues and American soccer in general, there's caveats to everything. It's like, yes, on the plus side, it's awesome that so many people, and there's that hunger to go see a Bay FC game. But, there's the caveat on the other side, but it's in baseball, and all those new eyeballs got to see the game that we love in maybe not the purest of circumstances.
Right. Look, and again, I'm not going to look too closely at this and again, try to undermine it. I'm just saying Americans love an event. We show up for events. Are we showing up because it's soccer? Or are we showing up because it's cool that there's this one-time thing happening in a place that doesn't usually happen? Right. And you'd have to poll individuals who attended the game. And obviously you have to follow people around to know if they're going to stick with soccer or stick with Bay FC if they weren't already fans. It's possible that there were 40,000 Bay FC fans who were willing to travel for this game to this park, whether they live in San Francisco or the South Bay or across the bridge or in Sacramento. Who knows? Right. Maybe this was like, because of the size and because of the event, it attracted the regional fan base of Bay FC. But it's also possible that this doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of what Bay FC's popularity truly is in the area. And yet, again, it's a rising tide lifts all boats, chip away at the, at the problem kind of thing.
Yeah, there's going to be some kids and some first timers that are going to hold on to that. Remember that time we went to that jam-packed stadium and saw that women's soccer game. Going back to that list that you threw up onto the screen, impressed. I guess I feel humbled that San Diego Wave have consistently gotten, or on many, many occasions, according to that list, have gotten over the 30,000 attendance marker, which is very impressive. But I know that you were a bit of a collector of dead club things, and that kind of errant third on that list, it said the Bay Cyber Rays. Are you familiar with that team, or is that completely an erroneous entry?
No. You don't. What, you're doubting the existence of the Cyber Rays? Is that what you're telling me, Rob? The San Jose
wanted to
Cyber
confirm that. Are you aware of the old Cyber Rays?
I am. I'm asking if you were before we threw up that list. You had no idea they existed. No. You were not a cyber. You were not Cyber Ray aware. This is the logo.
Oh, wow, way to pull that
for
up.
the Cyber Rays. Yeah, this is of a specific era, Rob. I mean, you saw that it said 2001 on that list, right?
Yeah.
And the Cyber Rays were tapping into a cultural moment that simply does not exist anymore. And we don't look. We had the Tampa Bay first Devil Rays, and then certain reactionary elements in American society were like, "Well, you can't have devil in the name. That's scandalous," and they dropped the devil. And I don't know if that was
what that was. I imagine that was what it was, but the fact that that's the reality is pretty wild. That's sensitive, huh?
Maybe that's a Mandela effect thing. I don't know for sure. I'd have to double check. I'm pretty sure that that's the case, though. That was the reason they dropped the devil. It was just, they just didn't want to swim
thousands
against
of people
that
chanting
tide.
devils. Yeah, fair enough.
Maybe. Again, lots going on here. That not only is this a ray that is somehow cyber. Why it's maybe because it's getting Silicon Valley, San Jose. That's the vibe there. This ray also has some intoxicating eyes. I mean, those eyes are something
winking
else,
at you from across the fish tank there.
Yeah, wild stuff there from the old days of women's soccer. I believe that was a WUSA team. Am I wrong about that? To get my my chronology of women's leagues right. We had WUSA, we had WPS, we're on NWSL. Am I missing any in there? I think that's the three, right?
There's
Yeah,
probably
this is
another
the third one,
there.
I think. Probably regional for sure. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, either way, to wrap that up, Bay FC getting 40,000 in attendance to the baseball stadium out there, breaking the NWSL record. Moving on, going from the good to the bad. It was week 1 in Serie A in Italy. And of course, we got two of the top, or quite a few of the top American players overseas, but two in particular had a rough go. Do you want to start with Milan and Cremonese or Weston McKennie's experience with Parma fans?
Well, okay, let's keep it on the field for a second. And AC Milan came into the season with lots of questions. Allegri in charge, okay. What was the makeup of that team going to look like? Leao was hurt. That is a consideration, and I think it's very much up in the air how Allegri gets his best attackers on the field all at the same time if Leao is available, because you've got Pulisic, you've got Leao, obviously Santi Jimenez seems to be not in the plans necessarily, but nothing's happened yet. We still have a week to go before the transfer window closes, Rob. I mean, obviously when you lose to a team like Cremonese, that's going to create a lot of pressure. Milan shouldn't be losing to them, at least not historically. Luka Modric got the start and went 74 minutes. How heavily are they relying on Luka Modric, who should be a substitute kind of player at his age? I mean, I love Luka, and I know Serie A is a different kind of league, but man, I don't know. It was an odd day for Milan. Nothing really happening for Pulisic, who seemed to be disconnected from Jimenez. They were supposed to be playing as dual forwards. I don't think that's necessarily Pulisic's best position. I mean, it was two very good goals from Cremonese. I mean, Bashiroto is. You see his celebration, Rob?
No, I didn't. What'd he do?
Guy's got some guns on him, and he did one of those like wrestler moves. You kind of lean down and like flex. It's like a bodybuilder type of move. And went straight over to the sideline, got himself in front of a camera, and did something pretty impressive. And then obviously that second goal from Bonazzoli was just, I mean, that's incredible. How do you account for that? Acrobatics. But Milan shouldn't be losing, right? They shouldn't be.
No, yeah, despite the quality of that finish, Milan shouldn't be in the position to concede, and to not having scored enough goals to, weather the storm. I mean, teams in the top flight are going to score a banger every now and again, but you got to be able to outscore teams, and that's kind of, at least, I mean, obviously small sample size, but Milan had a lot of trouble. They didn't score more than one goal very often, and they weren't able to keep many clean sheets. So week 1 looking a lot like last year.
Well, I mean, you look at the numbers, and this just feels like one of those games that is just unfair to Milan. They had 64% possession. They created 1.88 expected goals. I mean, whatever you want to say about expected goals, they don't always tell the story of the game, and clearly they don't in this case, because Cremonese scored twice on 0.21 expected goals. Cremonese was not dangerous, but they get a set piece, they get a header off the center back, and they get the incredible acrobatic goal from Bonazzoli. And that's all it takes when Milan can't find a way through, when Milan's chances are lacking. Again, doing better on the day, but not clinical enough when it counted. And I still think, they're going to have to figure out how to play with a center forward. And I don't know who that center forward is, because Santi Jimenez apparently can't carry that load by himself. What is the future of that position for AC Milan, I think, is a question.
Yeah, and then so sliding across a bit in Serie A, Weston McKennie, Juventus got a 2-0 win over Parma. Canadian international Jonathan David scored, but the story of the day was Weston McKennie, American international, subjected to racist abuse after Juventus's 2-0 win, and the subsequent, condemning messages coming out after that. But it happened in England last week. I think there was another one in Germany and now in Italy. So these sort of racial slurs being hurled out from the stands across the European soccer stadiums, not going away.
I mean, God, it's absolutely terrible. cannot be condoned. Certainly Italy does not. I mean, you would imagine this is one of those things where even when you're not hearing about it, you have to imagine that things are being said. Whether the players catch it or whether anybody is actually aware of it is maybe a different question. Italy, unfortunately, kind of earned a reputation as a league with a lot of this going on. I think, we're talking about 6, 7, 8 years ago. It was kind of like every week somebody was talking about racial abuse in Italy. Question. I'm trying to remember player names, and that's going to elude me. But I remember times when players were like, "I'm not playing. Like, this is terrible. I'm not playing anymore." And then it was a question of his teammates backing him up or not. And there was this era of, "Oh no, just play through it. Don't let them win."
Was that Moise Keane?
Moises Kane was maybe one of them, but I think even before him, again, I'm thinking about a decade ago, perhaps. Maybe it's that, again, things can change in a decade, but I'm not sure that things have changed for the better in a decade in a lot of places. And so, again, not to make this just, it's not even just about Italy. Obviously, you mentioned it's happened everywhere. We had the incident in Liverpool. So this is a thing that they're going to have to attack head on. The fact that Weston McKennie seems to not be in the plans for Igor Tudor as a starter. Patrice Evra is certainly one of them. I mean, that we had the incident with Luis Suarez, slightly different kind of vibe to that, but maybe Patrice Evra deserves mention. But Igor Tudor doesn't seem to rate McKennie as a starter. Now, he has won coaches over time and time again, right? And Cambiasso picked up a red card in this game. I don't know what that means for the next match, but Weston McKennie has proven time and time again to be good enough to play in a number of places for these Juve teams who I think of themselves, and I'm not sure Tudor's guilty of this, but think of themselves as better than they are in terms of the quality through their squad. And that maybe is kind of damning Weston McKennie with faint praise to say it that way. But, man, he can play, and he comes on as a substitute, the final sub, in a game that was already decided at that point, and gets racially abused. Like, damn it. And I know he's in the middle of a contract situation with them as well. And obviously, if you're not getting starting minutes, that make color your choice of staying or renewing your contract or trying to play out your contract. So I think, again, so back in May they were in contract negotiations. I don't know exactly where we are on that. Maybe it was an extra year on his deal. And so, again, is he going to extend past that? I think is the big question here. So, I don't know. I don't know if he wants to be there. He keeps sticking it out. He keeps convincing managers to play him. Let's hope that things get better for Weston in terms of the treatment he receives as a player, but also in terms of his role in that team.
How does Massimiliano Allegri keep on getting second goes at all these clubs? I mean, Weston McKennie must have been happy to finally rid himself of Allegri as his boss, but then his guy across town, Pulisic, gets plagued with the Allegri condition and coaching right after. The Americans can't get free of Allegri.
Let me give you an update because it isn't fairly recent. I was talking about McKennie's contract and I want to get the details right. So sure. He has 10 months left on his contract. He decided to stay and not look for opportunities this summer. There was a previous agreement that would have given him an extra year through 2026. Okay, despite a previous agreement between McKennie and former Juventus sporting director Cristiano Gintoli to extend his stay past next summer, the deal was canceled by the new general manager of the club. So he was going to sign a new contract extension, and then the new general manager came in and said, no, we're not doing that. So now he's got 10 months left on his contract. So he could potentially leave for free next summer if they don't figure out a new deal. And again, we'll see what role he plays. Now, as a U.S. men's national team fan, of course, Rob, we want him to be playing meaningful minutes as much as possible. And so there's that to watch as well as we get ready for the first international break of the new season.
I'm glad you brought up and updated that status of his contract, because that is wild to be like, oh yeah, I'm in line, I'm gonna have this job for a while, and then the new management said not so fast. That's kind of chastening, I can only imagine, and it kind of leads you to down the path of, well, is his time finally over, or is this another prove it year again? Like, will McKennie do it again for another coach under another regime? We shall see. We're not going to go too far into it, but Jonah in the chat throwing a bone elsewhere outside of Italy. Dust, Sargent, and Wright all having a good weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you for chiming in there. Moving into long ball number 3 here on Monday morning. Two of the biggest signings in the MLS summer. Mr. Muller in Vancouver and Mr. Sun in LAFC, both scoring their first goals over the weekend. An absolute free kick banger for the South Korean and a controversial, very late penalty win and for Muller up in Vancouver.
Not a penalty. Not a penalty. Not sure how we get to that. Not a penalty. Don't know why that's a penalty. Don't know why that's given. I don't know why VAR is not fixing not a penalty. No, I don't understand. You're running after a player who goes into the box. That player goes down in front of you. What are you supposed to do? I mean, I don't understand really what is at play there for the. I mean,
I watched it. I replayed it over and over and over again to see what contact they were talking about. Because even the commentator said, "Oh, yep, there's contact. That's a penalty." I wish I had the NCIS super zoom because I didn't see that contact at all. And even if there was, it was so minimal.
I mean, absolutely minimal. Absolutely minimal. That is, and again, I just to give a penalty in that situation feels wrong. Now we're in this moment with VAR in particular, where everything is supposed to be like clear as day, black and white. This is why we have this, so we can fix mistake. Oh, look, that wasn't called a penalty, but look, there's a foul or whatever. It's a penalty. But all I see with VAR is just more confusion about why we're not. And again, the game is subjective by nature. Refereeing is subjective by nature. There are moments where it's like, yes, that seems pretty clear to be a foul or a penalty or a red card. But there are lots of moments in this game that are at the discretion of the referee as to whether or not they are the right call. And sometimes, now, again, if you want to argue contact and that means penalty, by the laws of the game, I guess that's justification, Rob. But I want human referees to understand the game that they are officiating and make the right call based on whether or not, if the defender is not intending to make any contact, if the defender is in a position where his leg gets clipped by a player running in front of him and that player goes down, how will you call that a penalty worthy offense? How is that an offense to begin with? And how is it a penalty worthy offense? So again, plenty of people saying, I don't see contact to begin with. And then, so we now are talking about giving consideration to players going down, like basically advantaging a player who goes down in the box under no contact because sometimes you're going to get a penalty. And I know that's always kind of been the case, but aren't we supposed to fix it? Why are we not fixing it?
I mean, VAR is supposed to be there to remove some of the human error in the game, but you're just kicking it up a notch to add another layer of human error, essentially. Because if this is a penalty, and didn't they VAR and then give it afterwards? So after looking at it closer,
yes.
You need
yes.
So that's even worse then. So it's like maybe smack in the moment. So quick, bang, bang, he fell. But then to like go back, pick it apart, like I said, did he have the NCIS zoom in technology on that?
And remember that this is a winning goal in a massive game for Vancouver. Now, St. Louis doesn't have much to play for at this point, and they're not making the playoffs, right? But I just, it seems like a spirit of the game thing to me. Like, again, you're running towards the ball, the attacker crosses in front of you. And again, even if there's contact, how on earth does that represent a foul that you have committed? I just don't know, Rob. I just don't know.
I put a freeze frame in the video files there. I don't know if we want to
tell you nothing. That doesn't tell you anything, Rob. There is a moment where the feet are much closer together, where the foot and the leg are much closer together, right?
But the ball isn't even in frame there either.
Well, no, I understand the ball is gone. That is also maybe part of the consideration as well. Yeah, exactly. So again, if you want to get into like a argument about the laws of the game, that is one way to go with this, but I think it just comes down to whether it should be given, right? And that should imply subjectivity. Subjectivity is part of this. A referee shouldn't be giving a team an opportunity to win a game whether it's a regular season match or whatever, based on something like that. That does not feel like the kind of foul that should be awarded, and therefore, again, a penalty given when not only is the ball away, but you have where are we in the box? About as far away from the goal as you can possibly be, right? We're at the top corner of the box, and that's going to be where. I have a producer on the radio show, Emmett McConnell, who has his own principle for these kind of moments, Rob. And this is his idea. His idea is if there is a foul in the box, the ball's outside the box by a lot. Yeah. If there's a foul in the box and there is no goal scoring chance denied by the foul in the box, right? Because of whatever, players in the way, it's at the top of the box, you're going away from goal, whatever it might be. It shouldn't be a penalty kick. A penalty is too much of an award for that foul. It doesn't feel right. It's not in balance with what was happening in the game. You're giving a penalty for that? Not because look, if a player is going in on goal and is about to let the ball go and score a goal or at least get a shot off, and you don't know if the keeper will save it, and somebody clips him and he goes down, that seems right to give a penalty. Oh, he almost scored. He might have scored. If you can say he might have scored by the sequence that delivers the penalty, then give a penalty. If you're gonna say that this is a might have scored situation, no way. No way. No one who has ever seen a soccer game is going, you know what? That was a goal scoring opportunity. It was not. It was probably 2 or 3 seconds, 2 or 3 passes, 2 or 3 sequences away from a goal scoring. Maybe he cuts it back and there's something, but there's 4 defenders in the box bracketing 2 Vancouver players. Shouldn't be a penalty.
It's pretty nonsensical. And just in another game where I was really had my hands on my head because of a VAR decision. I mean, I didn't necessarily, because I got so many midweek, I didn't necessarily want Inter Miami to get another one. But in that Inter Miami versus DC United, it was 1-1, and a header went onto a DC United player's arm at the death, and VAR didn't even look at that one. So not the 100% the same situation, but midweek in the League's Cup, the VAR parsed through things, and Inter Miami got 2 controversial penalties. And then, at the weekend, something almost exactly the same happened in the DC United game, and nothing.
Here's the problem. So Riverside Grove is going in on this. He says if you trip a guy, that's a foul. It doesn't look like a trip to me. So I don't know. We're arguing here. It doesn't look like a trip. Why do we want referees picking winners and losers based on feels? That smells corrupt. That's taking it to an extreme. I'm saying you trust a referee who is trained in the game to understand what moments are moments to give a penalty and what moments are not, based on the kind of contact. Look, if he had kicked his leg out, if the defender for St. Louis had kicked his leg out and dropped this Vancouver player, regardless of where, I'm saying, okay, fine. Look, by the law of the game, as currently written, that's a foul, that's a penalty. But that's not what we saw here. What we saw here was something so subjectively questionable that not even everybody sees contact. How can you go back to a video and say, well, there's definitely a foul there? Like, I don't know how you can say that with clarity. And again, we're using VAR to go back and re-referee for what purpose in this situation? Leave the call on the field if you're not sure. Why are we spending extra time? Why is the referee in the booth going, you need to go take a look at that, when nobody can see whether it's 100% contact or not?
There's nothing clear and obvious about that situation whatsoever.
The problem is that if you do want if you want to get us as close to clarity as possible, or close to black and white as possible, then you have to give everything that even smells like a possible penalty, right? So, and Rob, I wasn't going to bring it up, but you got me riled up this morning. I'll mention what happened in the Fulham United game.
Yeah, okay? I knew you did. I wanted to give you that platform today.
Manchester United is given a penalty, which ultimately didn't. They're given a penalty. That I'm trying to think of that moment. You're talking about Lenny Yoro pushing off, and that goal for Muniz off the back of Muniz, because Lenny Yoro pushes off of Bassi, gets space to go up, win the header. Meanwhile, on the other end of the field, right, we get a penalty given on Bassi for what looks to be a little bit of a takedown. Now, I do think there's probably some play acting there, right? But if you're talking about wrestling in the box on set pieces,
it goes both ways.
It should go both ways. Right? It's a penalty because Bassi executes a takedown, but it's a fine goal for United because even though Euro pushes off. And it's pretty clear he pushes off because the arms are extended and Bassi moves. So, again, and so what we're saying is if you want some like black and white, well, then every single one of those should be called. Right. And therefore, on every set piece, Rob, this is like holding in American football. On every set piece, there is wrestling, there is grabbing, there is holding. Sometimes there are takedowns. How many of those get called penalties?
I mean, that's supposed to be one of the new things of this actually might be our future because apparently that's supposed to be a thing of emphasis.
Is that what we want, though? Do we want every set piece to result in a penalty because some center back is grabbing a forward? Like, what is that what we want? I don't know.
Well, what made me think of that, if they're going to be re-refereeing every corner kick or set piece near the box, that reminds me of, so they get like a video booth review in American football for holding. Like you could go back and look at any one of those plays and throw a flag for holding. So if we're going to nitpick every single corner kick where there's, half a dozen bodies, bopping in the penalty area, there's just I really hope that that's not the future that we're looking at. That's all I gotta say. But
I mean, again, you want it to be like no subjectivity, then everything's got to get called. Everything, every grab, every push, every handball that's even slightly questionable. And again, we even had this recently, right, with the handball that was given against Everton. Arms stuck to the side for Tarkowski. Ball hits his bicep. Now, it looks like he leans into it, which to me feels like a penalty-worthy foul. But if you're going to go by, he had his arms to his body. But then it's still subjective. It's subjective for them to give it. And if they hadn't, there would be bloody murder on the other side. Oh, that's a handball. He leans in. Right? How are we ever going to have pure... Okay, let's move on because I know we've got a guest waiting and I'm getting all riled up.
We're getting all riled up indeed. I mean, the VAR, the endless debate continues here. And if you've tuned into this, not hit subscribe yet, do so now. Join the town square of American soccer conversation that is Morning Kickaround. You can also become a member of the channel, become an MK Ultra, or you could just send in a super thanks. It's just a thanks button right under this viewing window. Follow us along on social media. Write us an email or support us on coffee.com/morningkickaround. We are going to move right along in this program we call Morning Kickaround. We are going to dip into Get to Know Your District, Colorado, United States, coming up next here on Morning Kickaround. Welcome on in. This is Get to Know Your District here on Morning Kickaround, and we are happy to be joined to talk about Colorado soccer scene by managing editor of Burgundy Wave and co-host of Rapid 96 podcast, Mr. Matt Pollard. A blast from the past for both Jenny and myself. How you doing bright and early out in Colorado, Mr. Pollard?
We got his audio up. I mean, I know we have him here. I think I see him there, but for whatever reason, we're not hearing Matt.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Hey, Matt,
okay.
How are you?
I'm okay. Technical difficulties notwithstanding. And Jason, given how much you were going off on the officiating, reluctantly excited to talk about a game that did not have any officiating controversies involving the Colorado Rapids' worst performance of the season.
Wow. Okay. You want to start there? Obviously, the excitement going into the game was based on Paxton Aronson signing this deal, and we talked a lot about it last week. And as much as there's that element of the American soccer fan base who doesn't get it, I think we all tried to at least here on the show when I was on the radio, try to figure out, okay, what is this about? And Paxton himself had some interesting comments about the quality of his life and things he wanted to try to achieve in Colorado. So excitement, and then we got you saying the worst performance of the year. Go ahead and give us a fuller explanation of why that was so bad.
I mean, the LA Galaxy rolled out their B team. They had 2 kids who couldn't get on the field for what's possibly the worst LA Galaxy team ever, albeit with a bunch of caveats given LA Galaxy's game and situation with Ricky Puig. And they got spanked 3-0 in a game in which they didn't really look up for it. And this, unfortunately, has been a worrying trend at times. I would say this season and generally within the Chris Armas era. You could go back to spankings at Portland Timbers. The Colorado Rapids have never won or drawn a game at BMO Stadium against LAFC. And so regardless of all the good work that's happened in the last 18, 20 months under Chris Armas, as excited as Rapids fans are about Paxton Aronson, as good as the window was, given bringing in Rob Holding with the situation with Cheeto Awazim, I would argue keeping Rafael Navajo was really fantastic. And there was a point at which I did not think that was going to happen. This is still a team that is capable of going on the road, having things not go right, and have them have an absolute stinker. And this is why when you guys or when the people on MLS Season Pass talk about the Rapids come playoff times, like it's probably going to be, yeah, it's good that they made the playoffs and they're probably a first round exit, and their final game of the season could very well be an embarrassing lopsided scoreline game like we saw on Saturday and like we saw last year against the LA Galaxy.
So in my mind, the Paxton Aronson signing was a surprise. How was it on boots on the ground in Colorado? What was the reaction to the signing, and is this what Colorado needs?
Oh, do we lose Matt again somehow? No, we're not sure what's going on with his microphone.
I'm asking the questions were too hard hitting, Jason. I silenced our guy Matt.
I guess so. I mean, we'll see if we can get.
Okay,
there we go.
We're gonna try this without my headphones, maybe.
Okay, all right. Yeah, technical difficulties are close. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Sir.
So I think Matt, Rob was asking about the reaction to Paxton and whether or not this is what the team needs.
I think this is what the team needs in short tactically, because I think Paxton is a better fit slightly stylistically than Georgi Mihailovic. I think Mihailovic is a better free kick taker and is better in some of those critical moments where you just need a moment of individual brilliance and quality in order to score goals in big games against big opponents. I think if you look at some of the advanced metrics as far as what Georgie was looking like from a pressing standpoint, that had regressed a little bit. And if you just look at the first couple of games he's had with Toronto, he's had less defensive off the ball responsibilities than he has in the game model with Chris Armas here in Colorado. I think if you look at both of the Aronson brothers, they're both pressing monsters. And then if we just compare the two players, not who they are today, but who they were when they signed. So Georgi Mihailovic, January of last year, Paxton Aronson today, and you look at what they did in the previous European season, Georgi Mihailovic had trouble getting off the bench for a mid-table AZ team. Paxton Aronson was a candidate for Young Player of the Year in Eredivisie, and he scored 15 goal contributions in a league that over-indexes on young players and over-indexes on attacking players. We can have a conversation about what this meant for him leaving Utrecht, and I'm sure I've already gotten another mention this morning over on the alternative to Blue Sky from the various USMNT bros who think that this is the Rapids, intentionally psyop tanking the U.S. men's national team. But to Robert's question, the original question about whether or not I expected this, I think that all signals were is that the Rapids, this is the first time ever that Pollard Smith has had real money to spend in the transfer window. And so there's a question of what they were going to do with a level of money that the Rapids front office has never had before. And all expectations were is that they were going to get 2, maybe 3 players before the end of the window, not spend all of that money in one place. And they took a absolute big swing. There's no question about where all of the Georgie money went for this transfer. And I do think this is a big risk in that it's all in on one player as opposed to in a few different places. But I think that shows the level of needing to know that there needed to be a response given how down the fan base was after Mihailovic forced his way out. And I think it was also a big swing that was reflective of here's what this club is capable of doing when they actually have a transfer fund that's more than $3.5 million on one player.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is out of character on some level. I mean, obviously the Georgie signing was sort of a different kind of approach. I mean, look, I don't know. I never know what to make of the Rapids in terms of where they fit into the financial statuses of Major League Soccer, Matt. I mean, we know that there's big money behind the club that doesn't get spent on the club.
Spent on Arsenal.
Well, that's yeah, exactly, right. And so that thing of like where they're not a poor club, but they don't act like a rich club either.
No.
This is money that is you sold to buy in this case. Now, I can sort of understand the logic of it. He's a younger player. His numbers are actually better in the Eredivisie than Georgie's were when he arrived. You can center your attack around him for years to come, but if you don't give him pieces around him to complement him, then it's ultimately not going to matter. And that's certainly some of the reaction I've seen when I've talked to people is, okay, this is great, but you could have gotten 2 or 3 players of a pretty high level for Major League Soccer and maybe been a better team overall. So it's kind of hard to sell it as a marketing ploy because Paxton doesn't have that big a profile, Matt, but that is partly what I'm looking at here.
I think those are all really good points, Jason. The Holding the High Line, my Rapids podcast, our unofficial movie for the podcast is Moneyball, and so we've said regularly over the course of the last couple episodes, replacing Georgi Mihailovic in the aggregate. So yeah, I agree that it's taking a big swing on one centerpiece and whether or not you can have good role players around him. Rafael Navajo could break Diego Rubio's 2022 record for goals in a single season for the Rapids. He's got, 6 games left to do that. So I think that's a good piece to have around him. There's been a rotating attempt from Chris Armas and the coaching staff in players around Cole Bassett, in the formation overall, in where Cole Bassett fits in that formation in order to get back to what he achieved last year in the double pivot, where I think if there had been a second team best 11, Cole Bassett is probably a starting midfielder on that second team best 11. So I think Cole Bassett's there. I think he's a useful piece. I think Rafael Navajo is a really good complement or a really good person for Paxton Aronson to pass the ball to, for Paxton to get assists, and for Rafa to get goals. I think there's a really good question about what's going on at the winger position. We've seen Darren Yapi played out wide because Armas wants to get him on the field, but not necessarily in a 2-striker setup. They brought in Alexis Manyoma as a U22 winger who they think have some upside, but he's a loan with an option to buy. We've seen the Rapids have a circus around those types of moves before, depending on how well they go. So there's a couple of wingers. Can one of them hit? I think is a really good question. And we saw the last couple of games, Armas go back to the 3-4-3, the 5-3-2 that allowed Sam Vines to finally again be a wing back, where he had so much success in 2021 with the Rapids, got sold to Antwerp, did really well that summer in the Gold Cup, and we're still waiting for that version of Sam Vines to show up in his return to Colorado with the Rapids, and he was very, very poor in the game on Saturday and got absolutely dunked on by Gabriel Peck for that third goal. So it's a good question, Jason. Of you've got this really good piece. Chris Armas said in the introductory press conference in his opening statements that they're going to do everything that they can to support Paxton, to give him the players around him in order for him to be successful. That's good to hear the head coach say. One could argue the player who Paxton replaced 3 weeks ago left because after a year and a half, he felt that he had achieved all that he could given the support staff around him.
Right.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow, I imagine, for the team to hear him say that. But
Yes.
plenty going on, and perhaps Paxton Aronson gives some direction and some hope out there. But plenty going on in your soccer district. A brand new team and possibly a stadium coming along. Denver Summit. What is the kind of the buzz on the ground there for the brand new NWSL team in the works?
As was said in their kickoff party that they had at McGregor Square next to Coors Field, NWSL is vibes, and Denver Summit have absolutely been vibes. Really, really like the Nick Cushing hire. Experience in American soccer, lots of experience in the women's game over in England, and 2 of the players that they've already signed already have kind of, if you look stylistically, are similar to what City women's team tried to achieve as well. So I think there's a really clear tactical identity there. They're a little bit further behind compared to Boston Legacy. If we're just comparing expansion teams, Nick Cushing was a later hire than Boston Legacy's head coach. They've only signed 2 players so far here for Denver Summit. So I do think there's a lot of work for them to do on the technical side. On the community engagement side, they've absolutely knocked out of the park everything that they're doing with the local youth girls academies as well. Colorado Rush, where Lindsay Heaps was at, and then I can't remember who it was who was at Real Colorado is the other one. really exciting situation going on with their stadium, taking over kind of a brownfield site that existed, just a few miles south of downtown. So Jason, I've been on before where we talked about, fans having to go out to Commerce City. And if you just
Right.
look at the public events that they've had around Denver Summit as well, it's been there's clearly people wearing Rapids gear. There's people who I see at Rapids games, who I see at the C38 supporters group tailgates. There's also very clearly people who are there who don't go to a lot of Rapids games. I talk to a lot of people who are more into the women's youth setup, or it's moms who coach their daughters in AYSO, that kind of a setup. And so I think clearly Denver Summit is tapping into a different demographic who'd be more interested in a women's team than in a men's team. And there's very clearly a subset of the Denver Summit curious people who are not automatically Rapids people. And that kind of that's a further indication that there's clearly a soccer hotbed and a soccer market, that Summit having none of the negative history of the Rapids and being out in Commerce City and attached to KSE are tapping into. And surprise, you put a women's professional team in a city that is a hotbed for youth women's development. There's a lot of young girls who want to go out to those games, and they're interested in the team in ways that they're not interested in a men's professional team.
Mallory Swanson is from Colorado. I believe played at Real Colorado.
Yes.
I think Sophia Smith is also a Real Colorado alum. So there's talent that comes out of Colorado that has impacted the national team in massive ways. And absolutely having a women's team in the city can be a focal point for that. I don't want to make it about the MLS team, Matt, but since you brought it up, I mean, this is just going to exacerbate that frustration, though, over what the Rapids are relative to the scene in Colorado. If the women's team just goes, you know what, we're going to do this, we're going to connect with the community, and we're going to be obviously in the environs of Denver rather than way out in this removed location. I mean, again, I don't want to make it about the Rapids, but certainly that's going to be a talking point for Rapids fans, I imagine.
This has been a question that I've had going on basically since once we knew that Denver Summit was going to launch next year, same year in which we'll be having a men's World Cup hosted here, one in which I would argue outside of Zach Steffen, I'm not sure there's a realistic path right now for a Rapids player to be on the team for Mauricio Pochettino. And yeah, the question, Jason, has been, is this a rising tide lifting all boats, or is there a point at which there's going to be competition for market share? And there are a lot of Rapids fans right now who put down deposits for season tickets at the Summit. We'll have to see how the schedule looks like in most other markets to where there's shared space between an NWSL and an MLS team, even without the same ownership group. They've spread out in terms of when there are home games, or, it's a Saturday night for the MLS team, a Sunday afternoon for the NWSL team. But yeah, there's going to come a point, given, the rising cost of rent locally here, in which somebody's going to have to choose, do I go half season for both? Do I keep whole season for one? What does that look like? And I think Sunday afternoons, particularly if you're into the youth soccer setup here in Colorado, I think is more amicable as well. So what that looks like, I think, is a really, really good question. The most liked comment on the Colorado Rapids subreddit the afternoon of the Georgie Mihailovic news. So a couple of Mondays ago, whenever we got that Bogert bomb, the most liked comment on the Rapids subreddit was, Denver Summit is going to eat the Rapids alive. Now, things can change in a 10-day period, and Paxton Aronson certainly helps out with that, and the Rapids are feeling better, and, they could I think the Rapids will make the playoffs. Whether or not they advance in the playoffs for the first time since 2016 is a good question. I do think it'll be a little bit, not a slow burn for Denver Summit, but the fact that they're starting out in a temporary stadium, smaller capacity, and then are going to have more of a hard launch when they open up. I think it's 2027 or 2028 they're targeting for the Broadway and I-25 stadium location. But yeah, I think there's a very real possibility that Summit starts to outshine the Rapids, and we're 30 years into the Colorado Rapids, and despite just retiring Marcelo Balboa's number and just signing their biggest signing ever in terms of financial input, are still working for relevance in an increasingly crowded sports market.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty going on out there in Colorado, plenty of talking action, but to kind of my C question, this could be a whole nother segment entirely, but were you surprised, pleased, or discouraged that the Northern Colorado Hailstorm is listed to play in NISA tournament this fall?
Robert, I'm glad that they exist. We've seen so many times in which a USL team has struggles or a situation going on with ownership, and they say, "Guys, we're not folding," or they say, "Oh, we're just going to take a hiatus," and then we never hear from them again. So the simple fact that the club still exists, I think, is a net positive, even if it's dropped down below third tier in the American soccer pyramid. The league for clubs, I think, was an interesting idea, but I think very clear was much more amateur. And then at that point, you're competing with Harpos and FC Denver and those kind of clubs, and that's allowed to exist, but that's a far cry from winning, your first ever cup competition in the USL. I think they're kind of made for each other, if you're being honest, Robert, because before this news came out, I forgot that Nisa existed, and I'm still not sure that Nisa isn't a lifestyle and merch brand as opposed to an actual soccer league with actual clubs. So there's still a lot of legal stuff that has to go on there. I have a good relationship with the ownership group in terms of how nice they've treated me as a member of the media. A couple of checks bounced, and there's some legal stuff to be dealt with, and I am not a bankruptcy or foreclosure person necessarily. Worst case scenario in this, the sports teams associated with that facility, Future Legends up in Windsor, Colorado, I think quietly disappear in the winter, and then somebody, hopefully the community, is able to buy up the land and repurpose it. And if nothing else, it will be easier for a kid in Windsor to go play soccer on a Wednesday night, and that will be a net positive for the game in the Front Range of Colorado.
Fantastic stuff. You've been hearing the voice of 2024 Western Conference Beat Writer of the Year, Matt Pollard. Let the folks tuned in now, let them know where to find your stuff. It's great.
You can follow me. I am still on the burning hellscape that is the Bird app, regardless of USMNT people spamming my mentions. You could find me over there at LWS Matt Pollard. Yes, Robert, I still have the last word on sports handle there, but I'm mostly over on Blue Sky, or Burgundy Sky, as we call it here in Colorado, at by Matt Pollard. You can check out my written work at burgundywave.com, and you can check out my voice elsewhere on Holding the High Line with Rabbi and Red, wherever you get your podcasts. We are recording Tuesday night, so that'll be in your feed for Wednesday ahead of hopefully what'll be a bounce back performance from the Rapids in their Labor Day weekend clash with Sporting Kansas City.
Well, there you go, guys. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for joining in. Matt Pollard, covering all things Colorado soccer. Dot it. Put another pin in the map. Colorado on the map of Get to Know Your District segments. If you enjoyed that conversation and all the segments here on the show, feel free to hit subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. You want to step up your support? Become a member. Become an MK Ultra. You don't want that monthly commitment. Just hit the thanks button. Super thanks. You can donate however you would like. Thank you for everyone for just tuning in. And if you don't want to do any of those things, just tell your friends about Morning Kickaround, your favorite new American soccer show. We've got one more segment to go here on Monday. Let's roll into Monday's big question here on Morning Kickaround. Hello, folks. This is Morning Kickaround, and this is the big question. I'm Robert. He's Jason. And just at the end of the week, Hartford Athletic announced a transfer of Mamadou Dieng to Minnesota United FC. So that brings up the big question for today. Is the USL to MLS market growing?
Yeah, this is something I think has been kind of bubbling for a long time, is whether or not there is a direct route for players from the USL and particularly USL Championship, which is the closest level to Major League Soccer, up to MLS, and whether or not MLS teams are utilizing that league, looking at the USL and the USL Championship for players. Is this something that is kind of lacking in American soccer? So I without sort of diving into this player could hack it at MLS or this player is good enough for the league, when a move like this happens, and I think the reported fee is something like $300,000. So it's not a massive number, but it's significant, right? It's not nothing. And of course, most transfers in world football happen well below the $1 million level, like well below seven figures. It does give us at least this idea of maybe MLS teams are taking a harder look. Now, I think it's worth pointing out that Minnesota United has done this a couple different times. Like, this is a club that actually seems willing to look to the USL for talent. So Mamadou Dieng, forward from Hartford Athletic, jumps to MLS with Minnesota for something like $300,000. I believe Minnesota has, I'm trying to remember the other player. I had it in front of me here, and I'll find it again, Rob. But they have done this before. I don't know that it works all the time, and I hope that doesn't scare clubs off, right? So I guess, I would ask you, Rob, like, if you're running an MLS team, are you going to be more interested in a player in a second-tier league in Europe or a player in your own backyard? I guess it depends on how you value the competition that they're in.
Yeah, definitely it matters the context of where the player's coming from. And a lot of the time it's a path of least resistance too. You think that finding a player and sourcing a player within your own national borders might be easier, but obviously MLS has been dipping into the international market a lot more than in the USL market, like we're talking about here. But Dieng, I think it's worth taking a flyer on him. He's a 21-year-old Senegalese international who in 57 appearances has scored 23 goals. So that's close to a 1-2 ratio. So that's a decent standard there. And Minnesota United, like you said, more than most other Major League Soccer teams have been willing to dip into the lower leagues. Maybe that's because of their history coming up from NASL and whatnot. They're a little bit more open to looking across the landscape, maybe into the lower divisions. And if he's got that good of a return and Minnesota United needs to beef up their attack, it seems like it's worth a flyer to do so. He's done well at Hartford, and a team that's not necessarily an offensive juggernaut in their own means. So the fact that he's been able to score 1 and 2 for a team that's not not a front runner on the offensive metrics, I'd say it's a low stakes gamble for Minnesota.
I think there are a couple of things at work here, and you can go and find Jeff Reuter, who covers both MLS and USL, writing on these topics and commenting on these topics. It's been a while since I think he's taken a hard look at this, but I remember him writing about a market for USL players in MLS, and I think a lot of it is, a thing about USL that tends to be true, because a lot of these clubs don't have their own academies up and running, and a lot of them are thinking of this as, we need to put a winner on the field. It's, obviously there's no pro rel, so you're not being threatened with relegation. That could happen down the line, but for the time being, you still want to put a winner on the field. And so you end up with an I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of the age, the average age of USL squads, Rob, but I'd be willing to bet they're older. I'd be willing to bet that USL squads tend to be heavy on 25 and 30-year-olds, and so less opportunity for a 21-year-old player or a 20-year-old player to make a dent there. And then MLS teams are going, well, are we going to buy a 25-year-old player out of USL no matter what his track record is? Or do we want to find that player somewhere else? It has a deeper resume or more impressive resume, depending on their league, because they might not cost a lot, but you're still talking about roster spots and things like that. So if players in the USL can do this at 20, 21, 22, then maybe we start seeing those things. Maybe that starts to become a pipeline that MLS teams are willing to look at. I don't think Minnesota United has been one of the better development teams in terms of their own academy in Major League Soccer. I think that's one of the features of this team, is they aren't really a development team that way. They're not Philadelphia. They're not RSL. They're not even close to those teams in terms of bringing through their own talent. So they may be a team that is more likely to look to the USL, whereas some of the other ones, like a Philadelphia, is like, we don't need to go into that market. We've got our own kids coming out of the academy. But there could be more, and I hope that becomes a thing. I mean, every year we see championship players make the jump to the Premier League, and particularly young ones, because you can see what they're doing at that level. Now, this isn't a great example because he didn't stay in the Premier League, but Joe Bellingham makes his name playing for a championship side in Scotland, is now at Dortmund. So that kind of thing, we want to see that happen.
Yeah, I'm curious if we definitely have USL fans in the group and viewers. I'm curious if there was any players on your team that you thought could make the jump up. But to your point, Jason, most Players on a USL championship lineup are journeymen at that point. They're not, young players starting their career yet, but Dieng here is. I'm curious if anyone has watched him. Does he just jump off the page? Does he just slap you across the face with he's another level player?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, again, the goal scoring record speaks for itself. I wanted to mention that if we're talking about sort of the history of USL transfers, they've made noise and made headlines with selling players abroad, not necessarily selling players within America. Although Diego Luna stands out as a very good example of a player who did something at the USL Championship level with El Paso and got his move to RSL, where he is now an MLS stars. Okay, so look, 2024 Spider is saying that the USL average was 24.87 for age and MLS was higher. That's fair. It maybe more important is the number of minutes young players are getting. And again, these are just, we have to dive into the numbers a little bit more. And I don't know that I intended to make this about age, but I definitely think that there's got to be something to that, right? That USL teams aren't thinking about development first and foremost, or are they willing to give minutes to young players in a general sense? When USL players play, young ones, they typically get moves. We're talking Josh Winder. We're talking about Kobe Henry. We're talking about Diego Luna. We're talking about those kind of players who have made jumps, some of them to foreign leagues, but it's still something. Elijah Winder, the brother of Josh, who came out of Louisville City as well, is now with the Galaxy. And I think they spent a significant, relative to these kind of transfers, they spent a significant amount of money to get him. He's 22. So again, he needed the season and he got that opportunity at Louisville. And now he's an MLS player. Whether it works for him or not could have an impact on whether or not this continues to be a marketplace that opens up.
Whether or not this continues to grow this pathway from USL to MLS, I'm not sure if it's going to continue, but you'd feel that would be enriching the market, the economy. You need to create an up and down market between the leagues. You'd think most places across the world there is an economy within itself, a market within itself, up and down, and that's not necessarily the way it is here. And you think that for the American soccer landscape and the player market to become a little bit more well-rounded and less peaks and valleys of, picking up whatever is the leftovers or make money elsewhere, having this market of going back and forth between the first and second division seems like a natural progression for the player economy in the United States.
Yeah, look, this again, I think USL is developing. Right. The USL is also a changing league. And so as the league gets more mature and as clubs start to understand the market themselves a little bit better, and as they are able to put down roots, like when you're running a USL club or a second division or third division club in American soccer, your first concern is paying your bills and being able to play next year.
Yeah.
It takes a while before you can be like, all right, we're not going anywhere. We're pretty solid financially. What can we do to develop talent in our backyard now? Right? What can we do? And obviously in a case like Dieng, he gets brought over to America to play for Hartford. That's identification. That's signing players from abroad, which is obviously an opportunity for USL. But I think, more than likely the real market's going to be in developing their own players. I mentioned Jude Bellingham playing at Sunderland. He gets an opportunity to play. Coming up through the ranks. I don't think he wasn't an academy kid at Sunderland, but you get my point, right? Like this is this is a league that could be more involved in that part of the game as they get older, as the league matures and grows and starts. And I'm sure USL has some best practices in place. In fact, over the years, I have been able to talk to people at the USL level about player development, and they certainly want to do a lot more of this. It just, you run up against that issue of spending money in ways that are not going to deliver immediately. It takes a leap of faith to be like, let's really lean into this because we can start to sell players later on.
Yeah, we shall see how this all pans out. One quick last note from the chat. If MLS starts buying USL players, it makes USL investment look much more appealing? Question mark. What do you think of that, Jason? I mean, is that something that might perturb? I think that people online, I've definitely seen people say that, MLS doesn't dip into USL player pools because they don't want to make it seem more appealing.
I think it's possible that there's a general sort of unwritten, I don't think this is a league directive. I don't think Don Garber is picking up the phone and saying, don't buy any USL players. I really don't think it's like that. But I definitely think that there is a general sense around MLS that USL players aren't good enough. Like, I think that's probably the general sense. And I think there is this, there's certainly like an elitism thing in a lot of places around this. But also remember that, again, none of this has been established. And then what does MLS typically do? Not all the time. And there are examples, plenty of examples where teams have succeeded with domestic leadership. But a lot of times you're tapping into foreigners to run your team. And if you're Ernst Tanner and your entire, just as one example, and you can name anybody. Look at Lutz Van Steel. He's in St. Louis. It's one of the hotbeds of American soccer. There's got to be talent falling out of the trees in St. Louis. And Lutz Van Steel is like, we need a third Bundesliga player, because that's what he knows, right? That's his inclination, is to think that player can fit here. Let me go get him, rather than, and not to say St. Louis isn't trying to develop players. No, that's still a young club, but I definitely think that there's something to that as well. This idea that, like, why am I going to look in the backyard in America, where I'm not sure yet if they really have the depth, when I can pick up a phone and call my buddy who's got a club in Germany and they've got a kid that's coming through, and it's, again, it's not going to cost us as much, not going to cost us very much anyway, whatever. Those kinds of influences on clubs and direction in a general sense, MLS itself isn't mature enough to have connected itself with these leagues. And as long as they are sort of competing businesses as leagues, there's probably something to what Riverside Grove is saying.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you, everyone, for contributing in the chat today. Thank you for tuning in to Morning Kickaround. If you enjoy the program, tell your friends about it. Word of mouth is how we've gotten this far, and we'll, that's how we'll grow moving forward. Hit subscribe if you enjoyed it and want to see these videos pop up on your feed. Hit the become a member button, and you become an MK Ultra. You get priority commenting on these live videos, access to bonus content, and access to the Morning Kickaround Discord server. Lots of great conversations happening there. Threads on MLS, local soccer, USL Championship, the national teams, and general topics. So become a member if so willing, or you could just hit the thanks button right underneath the viewer. You can reach out online at mkickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. We populate that from time to time, or you can write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com. Love to get notes from the viewers over there. All right. And then one final note, if you'd like to support outside of the YouTube bubble, coffee.com/morningkickaround. We have some specific fundraising goals on there. Thank you to everyone who has supported any which way you are able. Thank you so very much. All right. We will be back on Wednesday. And until then, everybody, enjoy your soccer.